It's great to be back here. We're sponsoring for the 5th year for ETH Denver since the OG ETH Denver. Some of you who are OGs in the conference may be hearing me say that and also looking at the slides and thinking Threshold and having no idea who I am, but maybe you've heard of us under a different name. So over the past year or so, the NuCypher and Keep communities have been heads down, busy designing, implementing, and as of January 1st of this year, executing the first ever decentralized network merger. And so by the way, if any of you out in the audience have Nu or Keep tokens, you can upgrade those to T. If you see in the bottom left, you can just go to the Threshold dashboard and do that, and that'll allow you to participate in the network and do all the things that people want to do on Threshold, which is stake and run nodes, LP, participate in governance, and basically just get engaged with the Threshold community. So that's who we are, but what are we? So Threshold is a network for maybe obviously Threshold cryptography. And Threshold provides a set of interfaces and runtimes for different Threshold cryptography services. And if that sounds like a bunch of techno mumbo jumbo, I'm here to help. So some of you that might have clicked right away if you are a cryptography engineer or if you're a low-level infrastructure developer. But for the rest of us, a short primer on Threshold crypto. Threshold cryptography allows you to protect information by distributing cryptographic operations across multiple independent parties or nodes. And it requires some threshold number of those nodes to come together and cooperate in order to actually execute some cryptographic operation. So if you have a cryptographic primitive, let's call it a cryptographic signature, encryption, decryption operations, for the most part, you can probably create some sort of threshold variant of that primitive. That's not universally true for all crypto primitives, but for a lot of them, it is. And that's what Threshold Network is doing. So that's the what, and then the why. So why should you as a developer or an application builder or a user even care about Threshold cryptography and not just use our tried and true standard cryptographic primitives? The benefits of splitting a cryptographic operation across multiple nodes is that you can increase security because you're not reliant on any single central operator to basically execute this operation. You also get some availability benefits. So if you have a threshold of a bunch of nodes and a few of them go offline, as long as you still have a quorum of those nodes standing by and ready to sort of meet their service guarantees, whatever operation you're wanting to do will still work. And it also, of course, dovetails very nicely with all the things that we care about in blockchain, which is reducing trust assumptions. So I think Threshold crypto and blockchains are sort of two peas in a pod from that perspective, and allows us to really take a lot of the censorship resistance benefits that we get from blockchain and take those up even another level. So just some examples of Threshold cryptographic primitives. Encryption, decryption, you can have like a Shamir secret sharing scheme where you require some quorum of key holders or key shareholders to come together in order to decrypt some message. You can do something very similar with signatures, where instead of having one signer that holds the private key, you have basically a set of signers, and that key is private key materials basically shared across all of them, and some quorum need to come together in order to produce a valid signature. So that's all great, but what can you as a developer actually do using Threshold with all this fancy Threshold cryptography? And a lot of things. So decentralized access controls is a super interesting one. So if you're building some kind of application and your users are storing private data that they might not want to expose to everyone that has access to everyone in the world or on the public network, you have basically two choices. You can either use a centralized single server to sort of gate access and decide who can and can't access that data, or you can use Threshold and specifically Proxy re-encryption to implement those access controls in a decentralized and transparent way. You can also do very interesting things like conditional encryption or decryption. So you only want people to be able to access data if certain conditions are met, say like a payment or within some time box. We're actually running a joint bounty with our friends at Tally Wallet to create a social recovery mechanism. So if you're interested in hacking on something and on Threshold Network and with Threshold Crypto, I think that's an opportunity to build something super cool this weekend. And then the other major use case that we're focused on at Threshold Network for Threshold Crypto is using distributed key generation and threshold signatures to construct truly decentralized cross-chain bridges. And specifically, we built a product called tBTC, the second version of which will run on the Threshold Network, and I'll talk about that in more depth in a few minutes. So hopefully you have like this enlightenment moment now of like, okay, it all makes sense. Threshold Network basically provides a suite of all these different threshold cryptography services and exposes those effectively as an API to you as a developer. And so the reason why you might want to use Threshold Network to consume those services is because we basically make it super easy. You don't have to worry about rolling your own crypto, which is super difficult and needs to go through multiple audits to get something that you're comfortable with. We've implemented that cryptography for you. You don't have to worry about figuring out who's actually going to run those threshold cryptography operations that you want to do within your application or within your protocol. Threshold Network has a network of several thousand nodes that are basically constructed and designed specifically to do this, and that are standing by to accept whatever threshold cryptographic policies you want to send to the network and execute those on your behalf. And then you also don't have to worry about all of these sort of game theory and crypto economics and making sure that these nodes are properly incentivized to behave correctly. We've figured that out for you already with Threshold. So I think the best way to think of Threshold is just if you have a use case for Threshold crypto, think of Threshold almost like as an API for you to easily consume that. And then some of the specific Threshold primitives that are running on the network today, we have Proxy re-encryption. And PRE is great for this access control use case. So if you want to grant and revoke access to data and condition access on, let's say, a payment, so if you're building like a decentralized Spotify or some sort of decentralized streaming service, you can allow content creators to stream some content that's encrypted and only grant access to people if they pay for a stream or if they subscribe, for example. You can time gate, so you can prohibit people from accessing before some date time, or revoke access after some date time. You can even do basically any kind of arbitrary condition, either on-chain or off-chain, if you're comfortable basically trusting oracles to do that. And then we're also about to ship, I guess, essentially a V2 of proxy re-encryption, which makes it much, much more easier to use proxy re-encryption on Threshold than it previously was on NewCipher. And specifically, some of the things that are coming with those updates are scaling. So you'll be able to grant and revoke access on Polygon and other L2s pretty soon here in the future. We've also been hard at work building out cross-platform support, so you can use this super easily from a mobile device or a web browser. And just to give a shout out to a couple of the projects that are actually building on proxy re-encryption, I think specifically this one here at the bottom, Masterfile actually started at ETH Denver Hackathon last year. And now they're a well-funded venture-backed project that's basically using proxy re-encryption to create a decentralized open DRM standard. So giving brands and companies a way to sort of put their IP out into the NFT and Web3 space while sort of retaining some degree of control over that. And hopefully onboarding a bunch more sort of legacy companies and brands into the space. The other major application right now that we'll be launching on Threshold pretty soon is the version 2 of tBTC. And some of you might be familiar with tBTC already, but it is the only decentralized permissionless Bitcoin bridge. So if you're familiar with wrapped Bitcoin, you basically send your Bitcoin to BitGo or some centralized custodian. They hold on to it for you, and they issue you a tokenized representation of that Bitcoin on the Ethereum network. And you can take that and you can use it as collateral to do DeFi stuff, yield farm, borrow, lend, whatever you want to do within the Ethereum ecosystem. tBTC is basically offering that very similar use case where safely bringing DeFi, or safely bringing Bitcoin to DeFi, except it replaces that centralized custodian with a fully decentralized network of signers. So it's basically collectively secured by the thousands of Threshold nodes that are acting as signers within the Threshold network. And V2 of tBTC basically completely solves the main roadblock for V1, which was the economic scalability. If you were acting as a signer in tBTC V1, you had to over-collateralize your signer node. And essentially that made it very expensive to to run a threshold, a tBTC v1 node, and essentially limited the minting capacity. But v2 basically completely solves that problem without compromising the security and decentralization, which tBTC is sort of the whole reason for being. And essentially with tBTC v2, there won't be any practical cap on its minting capacity. Unless you're pedantic and you say 21 million is the cap, because that's how many Bitcoin there are. But I do want to make it clear, like, tBTC is not just a bridge. So what we've done is we've separated the custody piece and the minting piece, which means it's going to be very easy in the future for users to mint tBTC not just on Ethereum L1, but other L2s, other smart contract platforms where there's the DeFi ecosystem that has demand for Bitcoin. You can even bridge Bitcoin to DeFi without generating a token at all, and that could be used as collateral, for example, to take out a loan. And another very interesting product that's being built on top of tBTC v2 is Threshold USD, which is a decentralized Bitcoin-backed stablecoin. And basically, this will allow Bitcoin holders to bridge their Bitcoin via tBTC, take out a loan that's collateralized by that Bitcoin, and that Threshold USD is essentially an over-collateralized dollar-pegged stablecoin that you can then take and use to yield farm or do whatever you like within the DeFi ecosystem, or even swap into USDC and cash out into fiat dollars. So if you're interested in building things like that on top of tBTC, PRE, any other sort of threshold cryptography, we're super keen to talk to you, and definitely drop by our booth on the second floor. And by the way, all of this is a DAO. So Threshold is community owned and operated. It has, of course, like the original 2 dev teams by way of NuCypher and Keep, but there's also a very robust and thriving community. So there's already a marketing guild. There's an integrations guild, which is very actively going out and building partnerships with other projects in the DeFi space for tBTC. Threshold DAO has a treasury that's over $100 million, and there's a treasury guild that's very actively deploying that capital to help scale Threshold and to help scale tBTC. And so we need all sorts of talent for the DAO. If you're interested in any of those guilds or any other potential future guilds, definitely join our Discord, and there's great opportunities for you to contribute regardless of your skill set. The DAO is scaling quickly and needs a lot of talent. That's it from me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit about Threshold. This was effectively our coming out party as a combined network from NuCypher and Keep, at least in real life. So we're super excited to talk to you all over the weekend. And here's a bunch of resources. Definitely join the Discord if you're interested. That's where the DAO works day to day. That's where all the guilds hang out. That's where we develop and build our products. And again, if you have new or Keep tokens, you can head to the staking dashboard and you can upgrade those to T tokens and join the community. Thanks so much.